Where do you think Atlassian's kind of headed as a company, the changes that they're making, companies that they're acquiring? Where do you see them in 5 to 10 years from now?
It's interesting. Like sometimes when they do the acquisitions, I'm a bit like, huh? Like, so like Loom, I was a bit like, huh? Around, but I'm there saying, I think them pivoting more to the system of work narrative is sensible, and it's what, like, if you've been a solution partner like we are, like you always talk in terms of like the work and the solution, and the use scenario is not the individual tool licenses anyway. So I think that's very savvy and reflects how real humans use that stuff. Seeing that context is really important, and as part of that, people not considering the individual tools as much and about that platform is really, really important.
I think most of the time when people have a love-hate relationship with Jira is because Jira is not set up correctly for them, or there's too much process. Because the tool itself is fine. Like, obviously there's always things that you could improve. I wish like some parts were a little bit faster, or like this like feature, like there's always something that can be better. But mostly when people are really frustrated with the product, it's because there's a lot of process. There's like, I don't know, like approvals probably not in Jira, there's one service management, but a lot of steps in the Kanban board or the Scrum board. There's a lot of like Scrum process around it. There's a lot of like meetings that come with that process. So I think it's more a Scrum thing or process thing than necessarily Jira.
What is the capability of Rovo from a developer perspective? Is it essentially something that could take action for you in Jira, outside of Jira? Is it kind of just more of a ChatGPT style tool? I'm curious what your thoughts are on Rovo and the potential of it.
Now we are testing this Rovo, and in our team also as a user, not only developers. I guess that from my perspective at the beginning it was like ChatGPT, but with better source of information, because you can use it across your products, and also you can connect your other tools, Google Workspace for example, or HubSpot. This is really huge. We can be sure that this information, they use their Atlassian intelligence more secure about our data. Also, we try to use these native actions like searching some tickets, like creating some JQL, and if possible with Atlassian intelligence.
I feel like that's one people don't think of as a feature, but I totally agree with you there. It's probably one of the best things that Atlassian and Jira have in their ecosystem.
Yeah, because it didn't belong to Jira first, but they were really smart enough to buy automation from CodeBarrel and apply it to Jira by default.
What strategies have you found that are effective at preventing the tool fatigue for Trello or for other similar productivity tools?
Don't go all in right away. I get shiny object syndrome. I used to spend every day on product hunt, discovering new things and going and trying them all out. What I recommend is you're going to find a new tool and be like, oh, it does 100 different things, because that's exactly what the marketers want you to think. I'll see people who will be like, Trello's so cool. You talked for an hour about it and I can do all of these things. But that doesn't mean you need to now in the next hour go do all of those things. That doesn't mean you need to start building 1,000 automations in your board or adding 100 power-ups. Start small, and also start with the problem you're trying to solve.
I almost like approach it as the way we use it at Grid.io. It's like an alternative to those Office products at this point. We don't use any Word docs. We don't use any Excel spreadsheets. That's all Confluence. Don't use any project management tools. That's all Jira. Anything else that's in that realm, we just find a way to make it work with Atlassian, because I hate using more than a few tools for everything that we do. You know, if you have a project management tool and then a chat tool, then an email tool, some kind of a documentation tool, and then multiple documentation tools if you're using Word, PowerPoint, Excel. You're using so many different apps you have to do, but it's just too complicated. I'd rather have Confluence. I'd rather have a document, see that document, link it back to a Jira task. If those could be even combined, Jira and Confluence, kind of more like a Notion, I would love it even more. So the less tools, the better in my mind.
Welcome. I hope everyone's doing well. I'm looking forward to diving in today. Quick introduction about myself. My name is Whitney. I've done a couple of advanced workflow demos, and today we're going to do one that's focused more on Jira Service Management. I'm an Atlassian Solutions Architect and Manager with Grid.io. I've worked as an admin in the Atlassian tool stack for over 10 years. One of the tools that I started with was actually Jira Service Desk. And that kind of became my bread and butter and something that I became very passionate about over that time digging into the rest of the stack. So today, we're going to kind of go through a deeper dive, additional and advanced functionality of these workflows, do some live demoing and walk through. One thing I wanted to do a quick shout out, we have a newsletter. It's just one Jira tip a week. You can sign up for it. As it says on the screen, no fluff, just smart, actionable advice to make Jira work for you. There's a link available in the links tab. Our moderator, Selena, if you can't access it, she can also drop it into the chat. Our agenda for today will be as followed. We're going to talk about, workflows and why they matter, the parts of designing custom workflows and then enhancing them. We'll talk about using automation rules to continue to enhance them and enhance your processes, turn some of those manual efforts into automated efforts. We'll talk about the best practices for workflow optimization, and then we'll have our live demos and walkthroughs with a Q&A at the end. So why do workflows matter? Workflows, they define how work moves through Jira. When they're done right, they can improve our project efficiency, they can enforce processes, and enhance collaboration. In Jira Service Management projects, some of that enforced processing and enhanced efficiency is really important. Common workflow challenges that we see within JSM are lack of approvals being put in place properly, or even bottlenecks because approvals are not being approved in a good time frame, overcomplicated workflows, inconsistent usage of statuses, but also blockers on moving statuses, and then manual movement of stuff, specifically that's maybe related to incident management and change requests that can come in the ITSM layout. And we'll kind of talk through those. These challenges can be solved through workflow best practices and then utilizing automation rules to really enhance that stuff. So one thing to note is we want to make sure that the workflow isn't overly complicated. And one of the ways to do this is to ensure that the statuses and the transitions of these workflows are not too specific. That rule of thumb that I try to follow is they should be broad enough to be easily used and understood by another Jira project and the user and agent without special training. There are instances where edge cases where you might need a, very specific status, but for the most part, we should be creating usable statuses and very clear transitions. So let me pop over and share. Actually, we'll stay right here for a second. So I talked about both workflow and advanced functionality as well as automations within JSM and understanding the difference between the two because they go hand in hand. So your automation rules, when this, then that, and then do something, right? You've got a condition, you've got an action, you've got a trigger. And then there's the workflow logic, which is in your statuses and your transitions, whether you apply conditions or validators or post functions, still automated ways to enhance processes within your project. The two differences are the rules and then when you're defining within the workflow. Something that is different, as you guys all might be aware, is with JSM, we have workflows, we've got work item types, and then we have request types. And how do they all fit? So in this diagram, I wanted to show workflows can be applied to multiple issue types, or work items. But a work item can only have one workflow. And then request types will all have an issue type. So an issue type can have multiple request types, but a request type can only be applied or assigned one issue type. So where do the workflows fit in all of this? You have your request type, which will have an issue type, and the issue type will define what the workflow is that request type needs to go through. Now let me go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to walk through some of the parts of the workflow. Okay, and close that out. There we go. All right, so let's pull up just, in this case, because we're going to walk through with JSM, this is specifically focused on like ITSM, service requests, incident management, change requests, problems, that type of work. We're just going to pull up our general service request. This should look pretty familiar if you've worked in JSM. This is the workflow. Now, as we all know, these are statuses, and then these are transitions. And with each of these, we can apply conditions and validators and post functions. Common post function is when a ticket gets resolved, you auto set the resolution. A common validator would be a ticket can't move from waiting for support to in progress unless it's been assigned. A common condition could be that only a certain group of individuals can escalate a ticket. So let me go ahead and pull this workflow into edit mode. Let's close that, expand to full screen. Okay, so we'll keep the transition labels. Nope, I'll take them all. So waiting for support. If we wanted to add in additional functionality that makes sure we don't have unassigned tickets getting worked on, whether that's just to keep track of, for managers to keep track of what their team's working on. If we, there's some IT teams that like to do a, hey, individual agents have closed X amount of tickets for a month in the competition type of thing. There are a lot of different reasons why you would want to do this. One of those is it's just best practice to make sure that all tickets are assigned. So with this, we could do waiting for support to in progress, validator. Now in this case, we want to do a validator because if we did conditions happen before the transition. So if the ticket is unassigned, the ability to transition it would be hidden entirely, versus being able to transition it to an in progress state and then identifying that, hey, the assignee is empty and you need to assign it. Another way to address that is an automation rule that says basically when an issue transitions from a certain status to the next status, the person who transitioned it becomes the assignee. That's the assumption that we really shouldn't be moving tickets from a state to an in progress state unless we're the ones working on it. So in this case, we would do field required validator and say assignee I like to put very clear error messages so that when the transition happens, it's very clear to the person acting on it what needs to happen to fix it. Okay. Then we talked about escalation, and with this we could do a condition where we could say the condition is that only a user in a project role, in this case we could say only managers or administrators can escalate the ticket. And then what that would do, well, that was not the one I wanted. Let me go back and edit that. We'll do administrators can escalate the ticket, which means the option to escalate will only be visible to an administrator. And then the final one is when you resolve an issue, you could show a workflow screen, or you can add in a post function that will automatically, oh, this one's got two on the same. Move this. Live demoing is always a blast, right? So resolve this issue. We could show a screen like the resolve screen. We can let customers resolve them, or we could do the post function that will set the resolution when it gets resolved. These are just simple ways to enhance your workflow functionality automatically. You don't have to, go and build an automation rule. It wouldn't go against your automation limit count if you are on a standard plan or you have a very restricted number of automations that you can run. Doing them in the workflow like this does not go against that count. So these are ways to do that. In this case, so post function, we'll say update the issue field. Because resolution is a system field, it is not a custom field. When we saw those two options, it said update issue field or update custom field. We're going to choose the one that's not the custom field. Let's do resolution, set the resolution to done, click add. And now we've added in these three different ways to enhance this particular workflow and put them in place. No, I'm not going to save this because I have a couple of automations that we're going to walk through that are a little bit more complex, and I don't want to make sure that none of this will block what I need to do, but I wanted to show you what those types of options are, kind of at like a base level. Okay, so the first one I'm gonna demo, and we're gonna talk through, is handling incidences and turning them and keeping that life cycle of if an incident comes in and then it becomes, you need to raise a problem and that needs to be investigated, and then that might lead to a change request. Creating a way to automate that so that those things happen and that the ITIL process can be completed without so much manual effort. So what I'm going to show you is the three different workflows. In this case, we have our incident management workflow, which is a generalized workflow for incidences and the ability to escalate or de-escalate an incident. Then we have our change management workflow. This one will be more complicated, mostly because when we do changes and we are making changes on the system, it's very important that we know what's going to be affected, that the right people approve that, and that everything is tracked accordingly, and then that implementation happens on a scheduled basis instead of ad hoc, and everyone knows when those big changes are happening. So with this, we have the change management workflow. And then the final, or the other workflow that I wanted to show was the problem management one. Now, this is if an incident comes in and you need to create a problem that needs to be investigated. You'll open that, which that could lead to a change request. So I showed that an incident can get escalated and problems that can create problems to be investigated. And then after they've gone through investigation, they can decide if a change request needs to be created. So first off, we've had to create the workflows so that they kind of all tie together, because we're going to use an automation rule to be triggered off of certain variables within these different tickets. So let me go ahead and expand my sidebar again. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the automation rule and we'll talk through it. So first is I want to create a linked problem if an incident gets created and the severity is, in this case, a SEV3 is the highest. So if it's a high severity, then I want it to create a problem ticket to be investigated. And so what that is I'm saying when the work item transitions, so it's using that transition from any status to escalated, the issue type, in this case, we could do request type, but I chose issue type because I want any incident, if it's a high severity, to trigger this. So it's okay. It doesn't matter what request type it is. I've decided if it's an incident and we're using issue type incident, then I want it to include all of the request types within this project that are tied to it. And then the field severity, which is on incident tickets, that will get, generally that gets set by the agent or the person who gets the incident. The individual who submits it will fill out all of the details, say how urgent it is and what the impact is, and then you can also automate that. If you notice that the urgency is, high and the impact is greater than like a few people, you can decide that that becomes a SEV3. And you could also align it with tools or different services that you've set up within your JSM project. But for simplicity, because of time, we're just going to do it this way. So severity is a SEV3 and it is an incident. Then I want it to create a work item with the request type problem. So I've told it over here to investigate a problem. That's the name of the request type. And then I've asked it to copy some details over. For example, I want it to raise the request, like the reporter needs to be the person who triggered basically did the escalation of the incident ticket. And then the summary for the new ticket that's being created, I want it to be appended with problem 4 and then have the summary of the incident that was created. And then I'll copy a bunch of details over from that initial ticket. And then the final piece for this part is I then want to link the items together. So I've added the additional action item link work items. I've said, okay, for the one that gets created, it's escalated to, and then I'm going to use in here the most recently created work item, which is going to be the one that I had just said to create. So that's one piece of this whole incident to problem to change. So I've said an incident has come in, agent has looked at it, said this is a SEV3, and then it gets escalated. When they escalate it, a problem ticket is going to be created. That's what is happening with that rule. Now, to continue that life cycle, when the problem is investigated and it goes to, we looked at that workflow, the ability to submit a change request. So that problem has gotten created. Incident is then escalated. Problem ticket has been created. We're now going through and investigating the problem. When we've gone through that investigation, and before we complete it, we've identified, you know what, we have a change request that needs to get submitted. In order to resolve this issue, this incident, we have to make a change. So then I've tied into that workflow, submit change request as a status. And so we've said when this work item that is a problem, I've then added the condition, but when it transitions to submit change request, if it is this issue type problem, then I want you to create another work item. And in this case, we're going to copy some more values over. We could copy over the description. We could prompt for some stuff. We will copy some stuff over, and then we're also going to link that ticket to the change request and the problem. So now what we have is we've got an incident that we can automatically then trigger a problem issue, which then can automatically, I mean, there is a manual effort of an individual saying, yep, this requires a change request, which will then create the change request and can go through that process that is required to do the change. So I've put these automations in. I'm relying on my workflow statuses to exist and them to be tied together. And now I'm going to walk through that and show you what that would look like. So let me take my demo ticket that I already have created. Here we go. Let me de-escalate it. Okay, so we have this demo task. It's got information in it. We've added an affected service. I've put the urgency. As I mentioned, the SEV3 would get set by the agent. So, you know, they could choose SEV3. If it's not a SEV3, it won't do anything. But for the case of time, so I've set that. What I'm going to do is, you know what? Hey, this is a big issue. We really need to do something about it. I'm going to escalate it. And in the background, the automation rule is going to be kicking off and creating this linked ticket. I'm going to go ahead and refresh just for the sake of time. It should just automatically show up. But now you can see this is escalated to this problem ticket. So we've got the problem ticket here. And we can see information's been, you know, brought over, that the reporter was set as me, which was the person that triggered the ticket to be created, that escalated it. And now we can assign it to whoever. If I had that validator in this workflow that the ticket couldn't move forward from open to any other status unless that's assigned, it wouldn't let me. Or the automation to say, hey, if I'm the one that moves it from open to any status, then assign it to me. So in this case, we're just going to walk through it. We can assign it to me because why not? I'm going to show you that workflow again. So in here, we've got to go through this review status. We're not going to know if a change is needed until we get to the under investigation. So let's just move it in. We've got under review. What's going on here? Am I doing too many? Refresh. Sometimes I move too fast. Okay. Under review, prompts me with a screen of information. You can decide what needs to be put in here. None of it's required right now, so we're just going to move forward. Now we go, okay, let's investigate it. And we're in the investigation set, and now we're like, hey, this requires change request. So we're going to create a change request. Now, we've automated a bunch of this information that's been put into the change request. But as we know, most change requests require a lot of details. We can prompt with a screen to like fill out those details. You can do, or you know, a reform of things, and that way more information can be added. But in this case, we can see that now this specific problem causes this new change request, which is now needing to be acted on. So that change request is going to show up in the change queue, and it needs to be handled, right? If we use the affected services and we've tied those two, you can see in the risk summary, we can see, okay, this is caused by the demo or the problem ticket and so forth. And so what that does is it closes the entire life cycle of, the incident to problem to change. You can continue to add on to this to kind of keep some stuff in sync. So if you want to say, hey, a ticket that's linked, if this change request goes into, completed, it can then update the linked problem to completed as well. And then that can update the demo task to a status that will allow either completed and adding a comment to let the reporter know, like, hey, this has been done and resolved. Or you can move it to like work in progress, where then the agent or the assignee can communicate with the reporter and say, hey, the change has been put in place. This should be resolved. Can you confirm all of that jazz? And those are additional things that you can do to tie this all together. So that's just one way to enhance within JSM and your request types the ability to, when something gets escalated through a workflow transition, create a new request type, and you can continue to do things like that. Now, the next one I want to talk about is the ability for, it's another automation rule, but within JSM, you have SLAs, right? You can set up your SLAs, time to resolution, first response. I added one called waiting for customer. One of the things that I think is a common problem is often tickets will be in the waiting for customer for a decent amount of time, whether the customer became a low priority, they didn't see the notification, whatever reason, they don't respond. You can put an SLA in there that basically says like, hey, we don't want the waiting for customer. We don't want it in that status for more than 3 days. So if in 3 days we haven't heard anything back, we can either send a reminder out, or if you want, you can just close it out. So with that, I defined the SLA. I said, the status is waiting for customer. It's all matching priorities. Target is 72 hours. That is the SLA that we've decided upon. 3 days is the appropriate time frame for a ticket to be in this status. So what can we do with that? Great. Now, the SLA breaches. Okay, that just gives us information. But what can we do to like kind of automate this and enhance our JSM? We can take the SLA. Waiting for customer is a status in the workflow. So we say, hey, when it is in this workflow status, I want you to start counting on this SLA. And when that SLA breaches, we can do something about it. When it breaches, in this case, we'll auto transition that ticket to resolved. We can add a comment and just say, ticket resolved, we haven't heard from you, something of that. Something of that sort. And you can, tag the reporter in it, all of that jazz, so that they know, hey, this has been resolved. And that if it was resolved incorrectly, they can reopen it. But it does require them, the customer, to reopen it. So that's another way to enhance, use your workflow statuses to do things rather than having to manually add a comment and continue to check in, or be like, oh, you know what, this has been sitting for 5 days. I'm just going to resolve it. I haven't heard anything from anyone. You can tell the system, hey, if something's been sitting in this status for X amount of time and the SLA breaches, go ahead and close that ticket. And you can add a comment and do stuff with it. So that's another way to enhance your workflow and kind of eliminate some of that manual process. And what it will also do is the customer satisfaction. So, you know, if the user is like, yeah, it's resolved, and they go on their way, and they're like, I don't have anything else for this. If you have your customer satisfaction setting turned on, so the collection satisfaction feedback, it will automatically, when the ticket gets resolved, send this survey out, and you can encourage, you know, that customer feedback. And, you know, just another way to continue to enhance the settings and functionality within JSM. The next one that I wanted to show is not completely in place, so we might be doing some live building, but it would be an auto approve for, like, if somebody requests new software, if the cost of the software is below a certain threshold, to auto approve that request, and that if it's above a certain threshold, to then force approval on it. That's really helpful if there is a threshold on the team that's like, hey, if software or even hardware costs below a certain amount, just like continue to push it forward. We don't have to look at it. There's no approval that's needed, versus if it is over that amount, to force the approval in place. So with that, as a service request, we have the approval workflow and what this workflow looks like. And this is a requirement to do the approvals, is open, waiting for approval. Where's my edit button so I can show you these? Expand the screen. So in here, it includes approval step. And what this approval step then is, and I highly recommend, why are you not popping up? Hold on. Okay. So in this case, we've created a Jira custom field titled for manager, and anyone in that field has to approve. The field should be a single select in this case, but needs to approve that it can go forward. And then I've added in a status from the waiting for approval. Oh, it needs to actually go to the open. Hopefully it lets me save that. Okay, cool. So in this case, we need a status from the open to bypassing the approvals, because it for stuff that is below the threshold of cost. So we've got that workflow in place. And we have now, let's go look at our request type. As I mentioned, this one wasn't completely built, so we're going to walk through it. So let me go to my project settings, request management, service requests, and now request new software. Doing a very straightforward, tell us what the software is. We need a cost value because we need to be able to require that. Be able to confirm the threshold value. Okay. Save those changes. Then we'll create an automation rule. All right. So we'll do this straight from scratch. So in this, we'll say on creation. So we'll do issue is work item is created. And if the cost field is less than 500, then we will transition the work item to Oh, I'm gonna have to go back in. I think, is it work in progress? Might have to go confirm. I remembered the transition, but I forgot the status. So let's pop back over here. Look at this. It goes waiting for support. Okay. So in this case, when a work item is created, I'm going to actually add another condition. In this case, it's going to be request type equals request new software. That way, it only runs on these request types rather than on everything. It'll just go through all of that. So request type is new software. It costs less than 500. Then transition it to waiting for support. Turn on rule. Auto approve less than 500. So turn on rule. Okay, if we did it correctly, then when I create this ticket and we put in the values, it should auto transition to waiting for support and bypass the approval. So let's create this new software. Power BI, the cost is $499. As I do, there we go. We're going to hit create. Theoretically, this has bypassed the approval and gone to waiting for support. So that has said, okay, if it is less than the 500, and I'll show you if I do it over 500. In this case, let's do Adobe. We all know Adobe's expensive. Creativity. And let's hit create. So it's still going to create the ticket, but now it's in the open state. And we have to say, oh, hey, this is 698, request manager approval. We'd add in the manager. In this case, we can add that value to the request type and then bypass this manual step to move it to waiting for approval and just simply state, like, if it is above 500, greater than or equal to 500, then move it to the waiting for approval and set the manager automatically from the field that gets filled out. And how you would do that would be, we could branch this out. And so let's do it for new software. Branch the rule. So it costs less than 500. Then transition. And then we would add here for the current work item, if that cost value is greater than or equal to 500, then transition work item to waiting for approval. And that field should be actually set. Next. Okay, so let's update that. And then we can go back to our request. We can do request new software. And that was that manager field. We'll put it here. Let's make it required. Now, what we could do is we could turn this into a form and then have it conditional. So in this case, we could say, if this field cost has 500 or more in it, then show the manager field. We could also just require it on all of them and then run the automation on that. So for the sake of time, let's fingers crossed that we set this up properly. It should now work as I've explained. So above 500. It's on sale now. And here, I'm just going to choose an individual and hit create. And I'll go ahead and open it on the agent side. But what we'll see is it's now waiting for approval, and it has added Josh, the manager, for the approver. He'll get a notification that he needs to approve this because cost is over $650. But yet, still required field, we'll just put it in there. Sorry, Josh, you're going to get a million notifications. We'll hit create. Now open this one up. And it's moved to waiting for support and has no approval needed because this value is less than 500. So that's the other way that you can just automate that. If you already have this policy in place, you don't have to worry about that manual for the manager to approve it and waiting for that and that bottleneck. So those are 3 different ways that you can enhance your using your workflows and automation rules within JSM to enhance your processes. So let me go ahead and bring back up the rest of the presentation and we can move to Q&A. All right, hopefully it is sharing, I think so. So quick takeaway, remember your workflow is your road trip. That's, where you start, where you finish, what happens at different stages. When possible, make it reusable. The advanced features of the workflows, your conditions, they happen before. They define like maybe who has access to do a transition. Your validators occur during the transition. That's where like maybe there's a required field. Post functions will happen after the transition. Maybe you need to create a ticket or you want to, we talked about the very common use case, which is setting the resolution. You can also add some properties. I didn't go over these ones in this demo, in this webinar, because I go over them in the regular just advanced functionality and workflows. And this was a much deeper dive into some use cases specifically related to JSM. Okay, we've got about 15 minutes left. We can open it up for some Q&A. Let's see. I'm going to let Selena send me over your questions. She was moderating. I was obviously not looking at the chat. So hopefully this is recorded, as Selena did verify. And you can go back and look as we walked through some of the stuff and try to replicate them. And then if you have any questions, we can answer them. I do see a question right here, Susan. Using SLAs for transitioning tickets and sending emails doesn't count against automations, right? So in this case, because I set up an automation rule to send an email when the SLA breached, that one would. It would count against the automation count. let's see, there's a questions area. Okay, I just saw that. First question I'm going to go at. We have had issues using approvers field selectors for setting their own manager. Is that because it's a system field and we need a custom to set their own approver? So what I tend to do is use a user picker field, like creating a custom field that then they can select an individual in, and then when the approval step sets. I'm not sure what the issue is with the approvers field. That would work the same. It should work the same. You just have to identify when you are in the approval step that is the field you're using to identify the people who should approve the ticket. Okay. Do I have a naming convention for naming my automations? I try to make the automation be very clear as to what it's affecting. So in this case, what is it doing and to what? And then if there's additional details. So for example, I do with the SLA breach, I did waiting for customer breached 72 hours. Or waiting for customer, 72 hours resolved, which tells me, okay, on the waiting for customer, after 72 hours, we're resolving the ticket. There are a lot of different ways that you can decide to name your automation rules. I like to leverage the labels within automation rules to also identify maybe categories that they belong to. There are different, those are two ways that I leverage when I need to organize automation rules, because you could end up, with 30 and somebody else can come in and need to like work on them or whatever. And so, yeah. All right, now the question, which is, let's see, what does this do? If I start live, okay. Creating a custom field as a manager to approve, we need to create a drop list with the names of approvers. So you could create, what it would be is like, if you use the approvers field, that's an automatic field where users are in, like it's a user picker field. So they would select those if you used the approvers field. We like to create custom fields. So in this case, like the manager field, we would create the custom field as a user picker manager field, add that to the request form, or if it's being auto set. And then when you're in your workflow and you're setting the approval step, you're going to choose, okay, how many people need to approve it? If it's, everyone, because there's only one person in it, or if, it's a group, you can decide that number. And then you're going to choose Jira field. If you use a custom field, you'll choose Jira field and identify that you're going to use the manager field for your approval process to set the approvers on the actual ticket. That is how I would recommend doing it. Let's see, let me clear some of these out. Can we show a transition screen to a customer when an issue is escalated? So transition screens are not visible to customers. The things that you can surface to a customer are just the option to transition the status. You can show it in the customer portal, but you can't actually show the transition screen to the customer when an issue is escalated. What you can do is when an issue is escalated, you can send a message to the customer that says, hey, issue's been escalated, whatever that is. So in this case, I'm guessing you're thinking, will the user escalate it? If the user, the customer is escalating the issue and you need more inputted information, you're not going to be able to get that from the portal. The escalating to maybe kick off creating a problem ticket, you'll copy information from that initial request type. So if it's something that you might need on a problem, make sure that that value is there. But ultimately, yeah, you cannot surface a screen through the customer portal. There was a question about why wouldn't a branch card be used for the conditions? I'm not quite sure in what aspect we were speaking to this on and what a branch card is. Are we talking about the split off branch in the automation rule? I am gonna just brought that one up so that it could be addressed later, or if they could expand on that. Let's see, I just answered that one. I'll just answer this one again. Using SLAs for transitioning tickets and sending emails doesn't count against automations. If it does. So using an SLA, if you do the transition in the workflow, then no, it won't. But in the way that I showed, it would, because I created an automation rule to resolve the issue. The email that goes out for like the customer satisfaction, that's going to go out when a ticket gets resolved. That has nothing to do with the automation. But resolving the ticket after the SLA breached, because it's an automation rule, it will go against your account. Okay, for the change transition, is it possible to have multiple issues automatically linked to that change record? So in this case, you could absolutely link all of these, like if you have several incidences that then create a problem, and then that creates a change request that's going to resolve all of those incidences. You can link those all to the change request issue, like you can have all of them linked, and then you can have the automation like keep those in sync. But yeah, you can link as many issues. Now, if you want to automate that, that will be a little bit more complex, because you'll have to start with ensuring that maybe if you have 5 incidences that then feed into this problem for investigation, which is generally how it works. You could have one problem with those incidences linked to that, and then from that problem with the change request, which would keep everything in sync. So you could have one change request linked to the problem, and the problem is then linked to 5 incidences. And when the change request is completed, the investigation on the problem gets completed, and then that can alert all of the linked incidences, like, hey, change has been put in place, problem has been closed, please talk to the users and ask them, to confirm that what they're seeing is fixed. That's how you would want to do that. So yes, long answer to your question, you can have multiple issues linked to the change record. Do we need to create a transition waiting for approval, and we will get the option to set approver post creating the transition? You'll get the setting, like the approver, set the approver when you've created the workflow assigned to the issue type. It should be an option there already. When you spin up, trying to go through this process, because a lot of times I will use some of the templated workflows because they're already built in and then I manipulate them. I've built many from scratch and blank, but it should, yeah, like the status waiting for approval is a default status that should already exist. You should be able to add it and then it would have the option there. If for some reason it's not showing up, I would check in with the Atlassian community to see if there's some sort of issue or an additional setting. There shouldn't be, it should be right there, but that's ideally what should happen. To that, like once you should have the ability to set the approver, like select how you handle that approval step. Let me go up here. Okay. Can we restrict the visibility of certain request types on the JSM portal so that only certain users can see certain requests, etc.? Yes, absolutely. So on your request types, there is going to be a little lock icon. And what you can do is restrict who has access to those requests, and you can define them in that fashion. So that is something that you get with JSM. It's new functionality within the last year, but yes, you can restrict who can view them and set that up. You will need to create your groups. Pretty sure you can do it by groups, but you would need to create those internal Jira groups for like with your Jira admin, or if you're the admin, and set those up before you can like restrict that. If it's only like a few users, you can also just identify them in the restriction. But yes, you absolutely, that's functionality that is in JSM. All right. Let me see if there's any other questions. Let's see if I can answer this one in a minute. Can you show how to delete a workflow? Example, things to check before deleting a workflow. So one of the benefits in cloud is when you're deleting a workflow, when you're looking at a workflow, I'll talk to it. I don't think I'll be able to show in the time frame, but you're going to see if it's connected to any scheme. You can't delete a workflow unless it is on its own and not connected to anything. The way to see the workflows that are able to be deleted is in your inactive workflow tab. So when you're in your workflow screen, you're going to see active, and then at the very bottom, like the active is completely expanded. If you close that out, unless they put it to two tabs, but there'll be an active and inactive. If you don't see two tabs where it says active and inactive, then scroll to the bottom in the inactive ones, and you'll see all of the ones that you're able to delete. The system does a really good job of keeping you from being able to delete a workflow and breaking everything. So if you're not given the option to delete a workflow, that is because it's still attached to a workflow scheme. You're going to need to go into that scheme and reassign the issue type that is assigned to the workflow you wanted to delete. And then once you've done that, if it's attached to several schemes or whatever, you should then, it will get moved to the inactive and you should then be able to delete it. Okay, we are at time. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and just show quickly. Again, there's a link in the links, totally free tool, the ability to do a Jira workflow builder. It's a new tool, so there's some kinks and we've been evolving it, but use the link that is either in the chat or in the links tab and check this out. It can build workflows for you. Give you a breakdown. It doesn't give you, like, say, the JSON to then import the workflow, but it'll give you the visual. So if you just type in, it's not using ChatGPT, it's using our Jira and Atlassian expertise and building those workflows there. Selena just linked up to it, so you can check that out. And then feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can also connect with us through grid.io. And thank you for attending. I hope this was helpful and you had some good takeaways.